Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight, a rare venture outside the studio for us. We're coming to you from a wet and windy Palm Beach, Florida, right outside, across the water actually, from Mar-a-Lago. We spent the day there talking to former President Donald Trump. It was his first interview since he was arraigned in a Manhattan criminal court exactly 1 week ago. The Republican frontrunner for president arrested by a Democratic prosecutor on political grounds. Nothing like that has ever happened, and we wanted to hear from the man who experienced it. The conversation went in a lot of different directions, heavily on foreign policy. An amazing, really an amazing conversation. Here's how it began. Mr. President, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Last week you were in New York for this arraignment. The world watched it. You've not given an interview since. You were there, I think, 57 minutes. Tell us from your perspective what that was like.
Well, it was a horrible thing because I did nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing wrong. You look at even the pundits and the legal analysis, Greg Jarrett, all of these really talented people, they're saying he didn't do anything wrong. So that's number one. Number two, they were incredible. When I went to the courthouse, which is also a prison in a sense, they signed me in. And I'll tell you, people were crying. People that work there, professionally work there, that have no problems putting in murderers, and they see everybody. It's tough, tough place. And they were crying. They were actually crying. They said, I'm sorry. They'd say, 2024, sir, 2024. And tears are pouring down their eyes. I've never seen anything like those people are phenomenal. Those are your police.
Yep.
Those are the people that work at the courthouse. They're unbelievable people. Many of them were in tears or close to it. Many apologists were sorry, sir. We're sorry. They had to have me do certain things. They said, sir, I can't believe I have to ask you. I can't even believe that I have to ask you to do it. You could see. So in one sense, it was beautiful because they get it. In another sense, you know, it's nasty. I went to the Wharton School of Finance. They didn't teach me about that. That wasn't like
they
in
didn't
the cards.
about the arraignment part?
That wasn't. We didn't have a class on arraignment. And, you know, it was a sad day in many ways, and in many ways it was a beautiful day because the people understand. I didn't know this was happening, but the poll numbers have gone through the roof. The people get it, and the other ones are hoaxes also. You know, the box hoax. Look at Biden, he's got 1,850 boxes, and, you know, that's a hoax. And then the one in Atlanta where I had a perfect phone call. This is all weaponization. They're weaponizing our justice system, Tucker. And they think if they go and give you a subpoena, you know, I guess I'm very well known and people understand it and they get it, and maybe I have a bigger platform so I can explain it. But if you're somebody, a Republican, let's say, running for office, and you get a subpoena, you might as well resign because you're not going to be able to survive it. And the voters aren't going to handle it. The voters aren't going to take it. What they're doing is weaponizing the system, and there's never been anything like it. And it's all disinformation. You see, the other day, Afghanistan, one of the worst things I've ever seen. I think the most embarrassing moment that this country's ever had, frankly, the way we got out. Not the getting out. We had to get out. It was ridiculous to be there. And I had that so good, so tight, so tough. I spoke to the leader, Abdul. I said, Abdul, if you do anything, you're going to get hit really hard. Literally, he said, but sir, why? Why? He goes, why, oh, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you'll have to figure that one out, Abdul. But we didn't have one death in 18 months. He knew, not one death. And then to see the way we got out, like we were surrendering, like taking the military out first, leaving $85 billion worth of equipment behind, giving up Bagram. I was going to keep Bagram. I was getting out, but not for Afghanistan. It's 1 hour away from where China makes its nuclear weapons. It's one of the biggest Air Force bases in the world, I think the biggest, with runways that go 10,000 feet. I was keeping that because of China, not because of Afghanistan.
Right.
And they left everything. They left in the dark of night. They left the lights on. They left the dogs, by the way. You know, the people say about the dogs. They left the dogs. Everyone, you know, the dog lovers, and you got a lot of them. I love dogs. You love dogs. But they left the dogs. People said, what? One of the first questions I got, what did they do with the dogs? Mostly German Shepherds. They left them. What they did, the way they got out, was so horrible. Okay, everybody knows that was their plan. That had nothing to do with me. I was getting out, too. We would have gotten out with strength and dignity. And what happened? They got out. And the other day I hear, yeah, it was Trump's fault. Oh, that's right. It was Trump. I was gone for a long. I would have been out faster than them. We would have had all the equipment. We would have had the American citizens. We left hostages. We left Americans behind. Many, I think many more than you think. And we had 13 soldiers killed. And nobody ever mentions the fact that we had many maimed so badly. No arms, no legs. Their face was obliterated. This is the way this guy got out. We would have gotten out with dignity and strength. We were going to. But I was taking 100% of, I said, I want every nail. I want every screw. I want the tents. They said, sir, the tents are very hard to take out. I said, I want the tents. I want the tanks. I want the planes. I want everything. And a couple of them fought me on it, like Millie. He said, sir, I think it's cheaper to leave the equipment behind. I said, let me ask you, we have a plane that cost $100 million. It's sitting there. All it needs is a tank of gas, right? Give me a little jet fuel. We'll fly it to Pakistan or any place else, or we'll fly it directly home. You say it's cheaper to leave a $100 million plane? Sir, I think overall it's cheaper. These are idiots we're dealing with. They left $85 billion worth of equipment. They left our American citizens behind. And they moved the military out first. No, you move the military out last. I did a little skit with a 5-year-old kid. I said, let me ask you, here's the situation. I explained the situation. I said, would you take the military out first, or would you take it out last? I take it out last, 5-year-old. But they took the military out first, and they were afraid of our military. When I was there, they were afraid. We didn't have one soldier killed in 18 months, Tucker. Not one soldier was killed in 18 months. And then we got out like we surrendered. I think it was the single most embarrassing day in the history of our country. It was totally their fault. They didn't go by anything because, you know, we had a system of getting out. But if the Taliban, in particular, the Taliban, because that's where the action was, right? When I called Abdul, the press went crazy. The fake news went crazy. Why did he call an enemy? I said, well, it's Jesse James. I used to ask him, why did he rob banks? He said, that's where the money is. Why did I call the head of the Taliban? Because that's where the killing was. And he's there now, Abdul. I'm sure he likes me. He called me Your Excellency. I don't know if he calls Biden Your Excellency. Probably. I mean, you know, they're one of the largest arms dealers now in the world. They're selling the $85 billion worth of it because they only need 5% of it.
Of course.
They're selling the equipment. They're one of the largest, I think, second arms dealers. Brand new helicopters, brand new airplanes, brand new tanks. Unbelievable what we left behind. We ran, and there was no reason to. I had them. I could have stayed there for 5 years if I wanted to. I wanted out. 21 years was enough. I wanted out. We shouldn't have been there in the first place. But when I see what happens, when I see the level of stupidity, and because of that, it's all a big web. Because of that, I think Putin, who would have never gone into Ukraine when I was there, would have never. I talked to him about it often. Would have never, ever done that. When he saw that I wasn't there, and he saw these fools, these stupid people, and think of that, the way they left Afghanistan, and nobody was fired. I fired a lot of people because if they didn't do a good job, I'd fire them.
May I ask you, talk to Putin about Ukraine? What did you say to him?
I could see that he loved it. And I said...
he loved Ukraine.
He considers it to be a part of Russia.
Yeah.
I said, not when I'm president. We had a very good relationship. I mean, look, I was the worst thing that ever happened to him. I closed up his pipeline. You never heard the words Nord Stream 2 until I came along. Nord Stream 2 was their pipeline. And I had a great relationship with him, but it was very tough because they had a fake Russia investigation. And I told him, and he told me, he said, it's very hard for us to deal, don't you think? I said, very hard. Because we have a fake investigation that turned out to be a fake. For 2 years it went on. And we could have done very well with Russia. They have great minerals. They have great things that we want, we could have. And they need the money and they need other things. But that interfered. That was a terrible thing. That was actually a treasonous thing to do. Those people should have been arrested. They made it up. They made up a problem with Russia that didn't exist. Now they've all admitted it didn't exist. It was just on to the next one. I often say, they said to me the other day, one of your fellow journalists said, who's the biggest problem, sir? Is it China? Could it be Russia? Could it be North Korea? No, I said, the biggest problem is from within. It's these sick, radical people from within, because we can handle, if we're smart, we can handle Russia, China. I did. I took in billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars from China. No other president took in anything, and they respected me. He's the same thing, you know. I told him, you can't go into Taiwan. You can't do it. I won't tell you exactly what I said, but it was something that probably a lot of people wouldn't like if they heard it, but it was very tough. Don't go into Taiwan. If you do, we're going to have problems. Other than that, we're going to be great relationship. We're going to have a great relationship. And he said to me when I said we're going to do something, if he goes in, no, you wouldn't do it. I'll do that. I swear I'll do that. And he didn't believe me, but he believed me 10%. The same thing with Putin. I said I was going to do something really nasty if he goes into Ukraine. He said, no, you're not going to do that. I said, I will. And he didn't believe me either, but he believed me 10%. And the 10%, you never heard talk about going into Ukraine. You never heard talk about going into Taiwan until I was no longer there. Now, what a mess the world is in. What a mess.
We traveled to Mar-a-Lago today to interview the former president on his recent arrest by a Democratic prosecutor. But once we sat down, we wound up talking mostly about foreign policy. For a man who is caricatured as an extremist, we think you'll find what he has to say moderate, sensible, and wise. When we come back, Donald Trump's greatest fear for America, something we almost never talk about. We'll be right back. Covering the weather beat here in windy Palm Beach. Actually, we're here to interview the former president and now the Republican frontrunner, Donald Trump. While the rest of us have spent the last 2.5 years arguing about systemic racism and trans rights and other ephemera, other imaginary things, America's position globally has eroded so fast it defies belief. But Donald Trump has noticed things have really changed since he left office, and that's the topic of this next part of the conversation. Here it is. You said at the time when you were president that going to war with Russia, either hot war or cold war, would drive Russia into an alliance with China.
I did.
That would displace us as the most powerful nation.
I did. But we have a bigger problem. The bigger problem is the weaponry. The weaponry today is so powerful. This isn't like Second World War where we have army tanks running around shooting each other. This is weapons the likes of which the world has never seen before. And they have them and we have them. And China has them less, but within 5 years, China will have equal to us. China, I'm talking about nuclear. China has the beginnings of a very big, very powerful nuclear. They're short 5 years. They had started much later. Russia and us are comparable. Massive power, massive. And that's one of the things.
More than people understand, do you
More
think?
than people understand, yeah. Yeah, more.
Were you
surprised? They don't understand the power. If you look at Hiroshima, as some people call it, if you look at Nagasaki, you look at those two events took place many, many years ago, and multiply that power times 500. That's what you're talking about. Where it actually melted the granite. You know, granite is unmeltable by blowtorches.
Yes.
But the granite, if you look at granite areas, it's like water that got, you know, hardened, like an ice skating rink. It melted the granite. If you look at that and multiply it times 500, that's what you're talking about. When I listen to people talk about global warming, that the ocean will rise in the next 300 years by 1/8 of an inch, and they talk about this is our problem. Our big problem is nuclear warming, and nobody even talks about it. The environmentalists talk about all this nonsense in many cases. Look, I'm an environmentalist also, I guess, in my own way, because I've done a good job with the environment. But nobody talks about nuclear, the problem we have, the biggest problem we have in the whole world. It's not global warming. It's nuclear warming. And all it takes is one madman, and you're going to have a problem the likes of which the world has never seen. And it's only a matter of seconds. You don't have to wait 200 to 300 years for it to happen.
So what you're saying is demonstrably true. Why is this not something our leaders talk about or the press talks about?
Because I don't think they're smart. I don't think they get it. Putin got it. I would talk to him about it all the time. I never mentioned the word nuclear. You never heard me mention the word. You know, my uncle was a professor, a great professor at MIT for a long time. I think he has the longest, Dr. John Trump. And he would talk about a lot of different things, and it was very interesting to me. For years, I talked to him. Passed away. He's a great, great gentleman. I think it's the longest tenured professor in the history of MIT. But if he wasn't, he was very close, because he was there for almost 40 years. And we talk about things, and he said, you know, someday they'll have a suitcase, and in that suitcase, it'll be nuclear, and you'll blow up New York City out of a suitcase. And I said, no, Uncle John, that can't possibly. He's right. The power is so incredible. You can fire up a submarine and run it for years on essentially a tablet. Run it for years. So when we talk about war, and when I watch all of the people talking about Ukraine and how's Ukraine doing, blah, 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 Russia's sitting back. First of all, Ukraine's being obliterated.
Yes.
Okay, let's not even talk nuclear. But let's say it wasn't. Let's say they were doing better than anticipated. If he decided to use his second form of destruction, which is nuclear, that's the end of that. You understand? And I know where you are in Ukraine, so I mean, you understand it better than most. Most people don't. Most people don't even talk about it. They don't talk about the fact that he has equal to the United States in nuclear capability and destruction. And so I watch all of this happening, and it's so sad.
But can I just ask, so the Biden people know the power of nuclear weapons. They now control our arsenal. They don't seem worried about this.
That's because they don't understand life. They don't understand whatever it is that you have to understand. You know, it's very interesting. At the very beginning, Biden was very afraid of nuclear, because I watched him and he was, oh, they have nuclear weapons. Oh, which was exactly the wrong signal to send. You don't do that. But if you go back and check your files, you'll see Biden early on saying, oh, well, we can't do this. They have nuclear weapons. Well, you don't want to, you don't want to act that way.
Yeah.
But he was very afraid of nuclear. I said, you know, you got to be a little bit cooler than that. But what happened is now that nobody talks about it. But every day Putin mentions it, and every day other people mention it. And now all of a sudden, if you look, other countries are talking about getting it. This was something you don't mention. I call it the N-word. You have two N-words. You don't mention either one of them. The nuclear word you don't mention, because the power is so destructive. I met with professors at MIT, and I was preparing for a debate. I wouldn't say it was a long preparation, but I did want to talk about nuclear, because I consider it to be the single greatest threat the world has, far greater than global warming, like not even a contest. And I had these people come down. They were very smart, very expert. And I said, so when we start talking about nuclear in a debate, how would you handle it? And they looked at me, one in particular, and said, sir, you can't talk about it. You cannot talk about it. I said, what does that mean? He said, it is so massive, it is so destructive that you cannot talk about it. I understood exactly what he meant. And we stayed away from it for the most part. But now Putin's mentioning it all the time. We don't mention it, but Putin's always mentioning it. You've heard him say it. We are a nuclear power. He said not so long ago, I said, that's the first time I've heard a major country. You know, you do hear it talked about, and I did a good job. I did a great job with North Korea. Kim Jong-un, you went with me on a trip. You insulted him, which didn't make my life too easy, but that's okay. But you were there, one of the few. And it was an amazing, it had to be one of the most incredible experiences for you.
For sure.
But it was amazing. We had thousands of reporters. They weren't treated particularly nicely either, by the way, but I got along great with him. And because of that, it started rough, remember, with, you know, Rocket Man, Little Rocket Man. And he said, I have a button on my desk, a red button. I said, I have a red button on my desk too. Mine's bigger and mine works, yours doesn't. And this went on for a couple of months, and then all of a sudden, the logjam was broken, and he wanted to meet, and we did meet, and we get along great. To this day, we get along great. He won't talk to Biden. He won't even talk to these people. He won't even talk to him. He has no respect for him. He's a man. If he respects you, he'll respect you. He wouldn't talk to Obama. Obama tried to get meetings with him. He wouldn't meet with him. He met with me. I met with him twice. I would have had a deal worked out with him. He's got tremendous nuclear capability. It's the single biggest problem. Maybe this show's more important than even I thought it might be, because somebody's got to understand what has to happen, and they have to de-escalate.
So how would you do that now?
Well, now, so you have a problem. You got this crazy world is blowing up, and the United States has absolutely no say, and Macron, who's a friend of mine, is over with China, kissing his ass, okay, in China. I said, France is now going to China. You take a look at Saudi Arabia. Look at what happened. They're great people. They wanted to help us. He goes over and gets a fist pump. You know what a fist pump means? Don't shake my hand because your hand's dirty. That's what a fist pump is. They got it, and they were so insulted. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Oh, I don't want to shake your hand. Let's go fist pump.
For the past 7 years, the neocon media establishment's been telling you that Donald Trump is a dangerous lunatic. In 2 years in office, Joe Biden has brought the world to the brink of nuclear holocaust. Who's the dangerous lunatic? And they're lecturing you about global warming. Joe Biden says he's running again for president in 2024. We asked Donald Trump his assessment of whether that's going to happen and whether anything could get him out of the race, including a legal conviction. That's next. Democrats arrested the Republican frontrunner last week in an effort to keep him from running for president. Will it work? We asked Donald Trump directly. And does he think Joe Biden will actually run? Here's that conversation. Do you think Biden will stay in the race?
Look, I watch him just like you do. And I think it's almost inappropriate for me to say it. But I deal with other people. I don't see how it's possible. And it's not an age thing. You know, like I say, I have friends that are 88, 89, 92. Bernie Marcus, Home Depot, is 95. Smart as hell. He's sharp as he was. I mean, he's, you know, mentally, Bernie Marcus, Home Depot, founder of Home Depot, one of the founders. I mean, I had a meeting with him a few months ago. He was 100%. I know people that built their fortunes from 80 to 90. They were always struggling, and they made a fortune from 80 to 90. A couple of people in particular. It's amazing. He's not too old. You know, his age. I think they do the age thing because I'm 4 or 5 years behind. They say this is a way of getting Trump. Let's go him up. But there's something wrong. I saw his answer today on television about whether or not he was going to run, to a very nice guy named Al Roker. When you can't get a softer question than that. That was a long answer, talking about the eggs and the this and that. Look, I don't think he can. But say what you want. They didn't expect him to get it. Yeah. You know, people could say he won an election. You know, it always goes, I got the most votes of any person, any sitting president in history. I was told if I got 15 million less, I couldn't lose. They're surrounded by vicious, smart people, radical left people, but they're very smart and they're very vicious. It's not him. It's not him. He's now in Ireland. He's not going to have a news conference. When the world is exploding, I own property in Ireland. I'm not going to Ireland. The world is exploding around us. You could end up in a third world war, and this guy's going to be in Ireland and not having a news conference. He hasn't had a news conference, I guess, in months. I saw today where he hasn't. It's been.
Well, he can't. So if he doesn't run, if he's taken out by his own party, or who knows what happens, but it doesn't seem like he's capable of running again, who does run?
Well, obviously the one that they would talk about would be the vice president, Kamala. That would be the one that they talk about. But I don't think she's performed well on the big stage. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. But there are a certain group of people that will go crazy if it's not her. They're going to be very angry if it's not her. That's a problem. You have a very ambitious guy in California, but he's done a terrible job with the state. I used to get along great with him, you know, when I was president. I got along really good, Gavin.
Well, you got along with Gavin Newsom?
I did. I really did. He was always very nice to me. He said the greatest things. He would say things like he's doing a great job. Oh, he was very
About
nice.
you?
About me. That's why I could never hit him, because he was so nice to me. It's just laying in wait, right? But I could, you know, he was very nice to me. And relatively speaking, some of them weren't. We did a good job for the governors. But they talk about him. They talk about some others. I just don't see Biden doing it from a physical or a mental standpoint.
Yes.
I don't see it. But it's been a crazy period of time in the world of politics. But he's surrounded by people. You know, they expected Bernie to win. Now, Bernie's older than Biden, you know, whether you like him or not. He's sharp. I watched him being interviewed the other day. He's 100% sharp. He hasn't lost much, if anything, Bernie Sanders. But, you know, he's older. So it's not an age thing. I just don't see him.
So they're trying to prevent you from making it to the general election by tying you up in lawsuits, charging you with crimes. You've described the process.
It's the old Soviet process.
The old Soviet process. And you've described it as illegitimate. If this goes to trial and you get convicted, like, how would you respond in the middle of a presidential campaign?
Well,
how would
it's
you respond?
so off. Statute of limitations are years off. It's hard to believe. You know, usually when you have something like this, the Democrats say, oh, he's terrible, guilty. The Democrats have even said, I'm innocent. I watched some of these. I think it was Andrew McCabe, the FBI guy who I fired. He came out, he said, they've got no case. They've all come out and said it. And then you've had Andrew McCarthy, you've had Jonathan Turley, Greg Jarrett, Dershowitz, all of them, everybody, like, and they're, you know, down the middle people. They see it. They say, there's no crime. There's no anything. Think of it, Tucker. I've been through 7 years of bull investigations. 7 years. They've looked at, I have a very big company, much bigger than they understand. In fact, when they finally got my taxes, they said, whoa. You know, they took them years to get the taxes. They got them. That was the last you ever heard. You never heard one thing about them. But it took them years to get them, because they shouldn't be looking at my taxes. I was surprised the Supreme Court gave them the right. They shouldn't be looking at people. That's sort of another one of the tenets. You don't do that. But I didn't care that much. I just, on principle, I fought them. And they looked. I built a great company. When you do the things that I do, and you employ thousands and thousands of people over the years, just thousands, we've done a great job. And then I ran for president. People were surprised that I won. But I used to see these rallies. And I'll tell you, the rallies are bigger now. The enthusiasm is more now than I've ever seen. So what do you think, since your poll numbers have risen consistently since they raided this place, Mar-a-Lago? Well, before they raided.
In August.
They were going up substantially before.
Well, they definitely moved after
Since then, they've really been going up.
So how do you think that your opponents will respond?
I don't know how well. We have two opponents. We have a primary opponent. We have a general election opponent.
I mean the Democratic Party using the legal system.
Well, what they're doing is they're finding, and think of this, they say 11 million pages, but whatever it is, through all of these Democrats' investigations. I had the Mueller hoax. I had impeachment hoax number 1, impeachment hoax number 2. Ukraine, Russia. You knew the Russia. I got that whole term from you, Russia. You'd be screaming it and say, this guy's a comedian. But you remember that whole period of time.
Quite well.
It turned out to be a total fake. But think of this. You know, I tell this story very seldom, but because it's a sad story. So the Russia hoax was made up by crooked Hillary Clinton, Adam Schiff, the DNC, the Democrat Party. The dossier is a total fake thing. We're suing them now, as you know, on that. We're suing them a lot because, unfortunately, Bill Barr didn't have the courage to do what he should have done. He was so afraid of being impeached. So I have to do it civilly. I have to sue people. The Justice Department should have done, because these are criminals. But think of this. So you have all of these millions and millions of pages, and they get you on a non-disclosure agreement? I mean, big numbers, billions and billions of dollars, right? And they get you on a perfect non-disclosure agreement, or they get you on nothing. A friend of mine who's a big business guy said, you have to be the most honest guy in the world. Because with all of those numbers that you have and those big numbers, they don't have anything. And you have to see, take a look at the people I just mentioned. Look, read what they said. There was no crime. In fact, a lot of people are saying he indicted somebody. There's no crime. That's illegal to do, you know, what he did. So I don't see it going. I mean, we'll have to see.
So, but just to bottom line it, I mean, the purpose of this is to keep you out of the presidential race.
If I weren't running, or if I had bad poll numbers, let's say.
Right.
And again, remember, the Democrats are the party of disinformation. If they want you to run, if they want to run against somebody, they're going to go the opposite. For instance, they don't want to run against me. And now, I just gave you a poll. I'm 9 points up on Biden. But they're the party of disinformation. So what they say is, oh, we want to run against Trump. Now, they always do that. You know, they do that. And other people would do it, but they do it pretty much better than others.
Is there anything they could throw at you legally that would convince you to drop out of the race? If you get convicted in this case in New York,
no, I'd never drop out. No, I'd never drop. It's not my thing. I wouldn't do it.
No, I'd never drop out, he said, bottom lining it for us. Donald Trump spent 4 years in office taking what was considered a very tough stand on China, and with that in mind, his descriptions of a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping at Mar-a-Lago were remarkably nuanced and even affectionate. Really interesting story. Xi, by the way, apparently speaks English secretly. You'll hear it right after the break. Welcome back from windy Palm Beach, Florida. We spent more than an hour with Donald Trump today, and we were struck throughout the course of the conversation how his grasp of foreign policy, this man who was supposedly stupid, his understanding of world affairs is so much more nuanced and sophisticated and pro-American than the moronic neocons currently in charge. It was remarkable. Let's send all our ammo to Ukraine. Zelensky's like Churchill. Okay. Trump disagrees with that, and some of the stories he told us from his time as president were amazing. Trump and Chairman Xi having chocolate cake at Mar-a-Lago. That's the setup. Here's the payoff.
I told China, if you buy any oil from Iran, President Xi, very good conversations. I liked him a lot. I told him we shot 57 missiles into Syria while he was having chocolate cake. It's the only time he said, repeat. That was the only word I've ever heard him say in English, meaning he speaks English, okay? You know?
He speaks English?
Well, I'll tell you what. This is an interesting thing. We're having dinner at Mar-a-Lago, and he wanted to be at Mar-a-Lago. And we had a great weekend. But we're having dessert now, beautiful chocolate cake at Mar-a-Lago. He had his people. I had mine. He was telling me stories about China, the history of China. It's very amazing. It's got an amazing 5,000 years, you know, amazing history. And President Obama didn't go over the red line, and because of that, Russia took over Syria, and there's a whole big thing, right? You know that. If Obama would have done what he said he was going to do, because they were killing children. They were killing children with gas bombs, by the hundreds, by the thousands in Syria. And he said, if that happens again, and it happened a number of times, and he still never went over the line, but I did. So I shot 57 missiles, almost every one of them hit, into a military area, which had a lot of planes, wiped out a lot of planes, also had Russian soldiers, by the way. You know, they say I was so nice to Russia, right? I killed the pipeline. I sadly killed a lot of Russian soldiers, that 500 group, because they were doing things that they weren't supposed to. Nobody writes that, and I don't want them to write it. I'm not proud of it, but we did that, as you know. But we shot approximately 57 missiles in. So when I dealt with President Xi, I was with him the whole weekend. He had an incredible, I'm not allowed to say it because it's very impolite and very politically incorrect, a beautiful female interpreter. She was very beautiful. Today, if you say it, they'll say, this is terrible. You're not allowed to say that. But she was very professional. She spoke every word for him. Very professional. Had another couple of them, too. But she was there, and we're having dinner. And he would come in and say hello. She would say hello. He wouldn't say any word. But I said to him, a general came up and said, do we do it now? I said, yeah, you have to do it now. So I gave the order during dinner. Then I said, well, do I tell him? Because they're very closely associated with Syria. Do I tell him now, or do I wait till he finds out after dinner? because you have about 28 minutes before they hit. So I said, President, we've just fired approximately 57 missiles into Syria, into a base. The missiles are on their way right now. He looked at me and goes, repeat. That's the only time he's ever said it. So I think he speaks English. The only word, he never said hello or goodbye. He only dealt through an interpreter. The only word I ever heard him say was repeat. That's an unusual word. I said,
how smart is he? Could you tell?
Top of the line.
Top of the line.
Yeah, they're all top of the line. Our guy's not top of the line. Never was. These are top of the line people at the top of their game. President Xi is a brilliant man. If you went all over Hollywood to look for somebody to play the role of President Xi, you couldn't find it. There's nobody like that. The look, the brain, the whole thing. We had a great relationship. You know, when he first came to Mar-a-Lago, he came the first day. He was there for a few days. We were going to have a 50. It was so organized by them and by us, but by them. Very boom, boom, boom. Everything's like business, no games, you know. They don't say, gee, how did the Yankees do last night? Oh, that was a wonderful. They don't care. They don't care about anything. I said, do you ever go to a Broadway play? I'll take you to one. Do you ever have plays like, do you ever go? No, I don't. No. He's all, this is business. These aren't game players, right? I like it. You know, in a way I like it. You have no life, but that's what he likes.
Yeah.
Top of the line smart, top of the line. When they came in, it was supposed to be a meeting that lasted exactly 15 minutes. Then we go to breakout sessions with, they had like 40 people. We had 40 people. You know, the comparables, right? And we're sitting across the table from each other in the ballroom of Mar-a-Lago. And it was an amazing scene. But our meeting was supposed to take 15 minutes. It took 4 hours. We got along so well. There was a great chemistry we had. Great. We talked about everything. A great chemistry. But people ask me, how smart is she? I said, top of the line. You never met anybody smarter. How smart is Kim Jong-un? Top of the line. You know, people say, oh, this and that. Really smart. You know, when you come out and as a young man at 24, 23, even though he sort of inherits it, most people, when they inherit, they lose it. And that's easy stuff. He took over a country of very smart people, very, very energetic people, very tough people, at a very young age, and he has total dominant control. That's not easy. These are very smart. Putin, very smart. Now, he's had, and probably a bad year. Don't forget, that whole thing is not, if he took over all of Ukraine. And what are we going to do? Because Biden is so committed to Ukraine. What happens if it's a not winnable war? You know, there are people that say Ukraine cannot win, can't beat Russia. Russia right now, I'm not saying anything out of school. I read it in one of our newspapers, so, you know, it's probably fake news, but maybe not. I don't think it is. Russia right now is making massive amounts of ammunition. Sounds simple, right? But they're making massive, beyond anything they've ever made before. We don't have any ammunition. We've given it to Ukraine. We're not prepared to fight. I rebuilt our military, new planes, new tanks, new everything. They've taken the military that I've rebuilt, and they've given it all to Ukraine. I mean, massive amounts.
So who blew up Europe's biggest natural gas pipeline? We asked Trump. He would know, and he does. That's next. So the lunatics in the Biden administration promised to blow up Europe's biggest natural gas pipeline, and then Europe's biggest natural gas pipeline got blown up. Who did it? You're not allowed to ask questions, but we wanted to know what Donald Trump thought. He might know. Here he is. Who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline?
I don't want to get our country in trouble, so I won't answer it. But I can tell you who it wasn't, was Russia. Yeah. How about when they blamed Russia? You know, they said Russia blew up their own pipeline. You got a kick out of that one, too. It wasn't Russia.
Pretty diplomatic answer for a man who's supposed to be crazy. We're going to play the full clip for you tomorrow night. That's it for us here in hurricane season in Palm Beach. Here's the great Sean Hannity to take over.